Yes. I guess we're set to go, so. I will call this January 8th, 2015 meeting of the Blue Ribbon Capital Projects Committee to order, and we do have a quorum, so we can go forward with business. I will first of all I want to say I hope everyone's had a happy new year so far, and even though it is cold, and we're going to have a heat wave coming through now, so it's going to get all the way up to 30 tomorrow, I think, or something like that. Anyway, so back to routine, I guess, after 2 weeks of continued Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays, just seemed like. Anyway, I will entertain a motion, first of all, to approve the minutes of our December 18th committee meeting.
Motion approved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Is there any discussion?
I need to abstain because I wasn't at the meeting.
Oh, okay, so we're still okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The minutes have been approved. So, our next order of business, I guess, is an overview of the Parks and Trails Master Plan. Mr. Lenny, or Bob, do you want to?
Just a short intro. We started back in 2010, 2011 to update our park master plan. And as part of that, we decided at that time to do a separate trails master plan because the trails were so important. We felt like that ought to be done separate and then integrated into the overall parks plan. And we had used, for the two plans prior to that, the original one, then the update, we used Duncan Sims Stoffels, who had done a great job for us. But we felt like we needed to take a fresh approach, a different look at it, bring somebody else in. So we selected Half Associates to take a look at it. And Lenny Hughes with Half Associates coordinated all of this. He had some other associates that helped him with the team approach to do it. They've done a tremendous job. We did the trail master plan, then they came back and did the park vision plan and integrated everything into it. But beyond that, he continues to be a great asset to us. We have used Lenny to help us apply for 2 grants that we've been successful with his knowledge on the trail plan and trails in general. And that was the federal grant out at Lake Park for the road and trail that's coming in, and then the Garden Ridge Trail, which was a recommendation from the Vision 2025 committee. So Lenny's gonna walk through what the plan was at that time. There's been some changes. Plans always need to be updated as you go through them. So things change, but there are some standards that were set that are going to follow through, and we'll discuss those. And there may be some things while he's doing this that we'll jump in and give some greater explanation on. But I'd like to introduce Lenny Hughes.
Bob, thank you. And again, my name is Lenny Hughes. I'm Director of Municipal Architecture and Planning of Half Associates, and thank you for the opportunity to allow me to present the Trails Master Plan and also the Parks and Open Space Vision Plan for the city of Louisville. As Bob had mentioned, back in 2010 and 11, we had an opportunity to work with the city, work with the citizens and the community. Spent a great deal of time walking, biking, going to different meetings, meeting with citizens, meeting and talking with staff, and also with the Parks Board, and getting a lot of good feedback and input on the development of these 2 plans that we have here. The two separate plans, again, as Bob had mentioned, the first one is the Trails Master Plan that we looked at. It was again created in 2011. But I want to say that for these things we looked at, we wanted to have a tagline. Like I said, active adventure, creative connections. So the trails part was the connection part, and the active adventure was the recreational facilities. And as I will say that, had a pretty exciting canoe trip along the Elm Fork to the Trinity, which is really exciting. It was a very scenic tour of the area. You guys had the opportunity to do that, but I've learned a great deal about that. But also understanding the parks and facilities that you have here within the community. And again, you have a tremendous set of facilities, but as many communities within the area that is aging and growing as your city is, that we need to look at how do we update, reinvigorate, and revitalize the current parks and trails that you have in the area. So this plan identified roughly about $75 million in trail improvements for the next 10 to 20 years. The park,
30.
oh, sorry, for 2030, yes. For 2030. And also the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Vision Plan looked at a staggering $130 million in recreational improvements.
Or 30.
Yes. The items that, the key things that the trails component looked at, about 170 plus miles of on-street trails, hike and bike trails, sidewalk enhancements, access points, parking lot, trailheads, things of that sort. And the Parks and Open Space Plan looked at land acquisition, development of a recreation/aquatic center, redevelopment of some existing facilities, and new development for park improvements within the community. Well, I want to first start with the park, for the Trails Master Plan. And the key thing to look at is the current level of service, or that we're going to use that term frequently throughout the presentation. And when we look at level of service, we will look at the population that you have here, and looking at the amount of facilities, or in this case, trails, miles of trails that you have in the community. And we start to look at, well, let's establish a standard for that if we want to move forward in the future. We also looked at, comparatively, other communities in and around the Metroplex, what they have as far as the number of miles of trails. Make sure I won't touch that again.
Eric.
Yeah.
Nobody knows but
So we looked at the number of miles of trails that each community has versus their current population. And so currently, at that particular time, Louisville level of service was about 1 mile per 6,600 people within a community. We wanted to establish a target level of service that would either be comparative to the other communities as far as what their trails are, or somewhere in between there. So for this trails plan, we looked at 1 mile per 2,500 people to develop our level of service for that.
I have a question.
Yes.
When we say trails, are we talking about trails to be used for recreational purposes, or is this like to actually connect different places and destinations?
What we did for this trails plan, we looked at everything. We looked
Okay.
at a major trail network of spine trails that, for this, we looked at anywhere from 10 to 12 feet in width. We looked at enhanced sidewalks. I'm going to give you that a little bit later on. But the enhanced sidewalks were a 6 to 8 foot wide sidewalk segment that would connect to the major trail spine network. We looked at sidewalks as we go from our home to the enhanced sidewalks to the major trail network. And also looked at, from a transportation standpoint, on-street bike facilities, which are either shared use lanes that you, as a bicyclist, you would travel in the lane of a car, or have a dedicated bike lane, or just a sign route. So we looked at all different levels, from the grand picture to a lot of detailed aspects of where specifically would we route the trails, where specifically would we route the bicycle access points and connect back into the neighborhood. And these connection points, we looked at major destinations such as schools, parks, the downtown area, other large developments, Vista Ridge Mall as a destination, places of employment. So we looked at the connectivity throughout the entire city as well as the adjacent cities and then surrounding Louisville.
Okay.
So with that said, we looked at, the current population, projected population for 2030, and this is also going to be another critical point throughout the entire presentations, that we established this level of service back then based on a population of 111,000 people. That was the projection for 2030. The more recent information that I've just discovered, and Bob has let me know, that there are new projections for the city of Louisville, mainly in the northeastern, more eastern part of the community, as a tremendous, the Castle Hills, Hebron area. It's going to have about 46,000 plus new residents projected by 2030. In the south area, around Vista Ridge Mall and the 121 area, there's roughly about 9, almost 10,000 new residents that are becoming projected in 2030. So we have to take all that in mind. So we originally had a deficit of about 44 miles of trails, if we're going to meet this 2030 need. But with the new projection, we're going to have about 66, almost 67 miles of deficit for trail development in the community. So those are some pretty drastic numbers. You're basically almost adding a whole other community by 2030. So these are some important things to look at when we look at the park development aspects as well as the trail aspect for the future.
So that's assuming that Castle Hills is gonna be incorporated into Louisville by 2030.
It's likely will be.
How many miles of trail do we have now?
Currently, we have about 14.9, almost 15 miles of trails that's built. And these are not, these are more your recreational trails in the city.
Okay.
And they're not contiguous, correct?
And they're not contiguous, but the plan will look at a more contiguous network connectivity, as we talked about in the creative connection for the plan here.
But we do have currently funded trails of 13.5 miles, which will reduce that deficit to 16 miles of trails. And when we talk about trails, we're talking about the spine trail, and Lenny will get into that more and more. There's going to be other connective trails that are going to be required to take you from a neighborhood area or to a park or someplace else to connect to the spine. So this is pretty much just focused on the spine trail.
That 16.04 is because of the 29, not because of 52, so it's actually about 39 miles, I guess, deficit.
Yes.
We got 13.5 already going.
From the 29?
Yeah, if you subtract that from the 29, you get the 16.4. So we have to subtract the 13.5 from 52.9 to get the,
That's with
The
the
real
increased population in the future.
Yeah.
Right, the current program is 111.
So we look at trail facility types. We want to make sure that we meet the needs of multiple users. The avid cyclists, the call them Spanish jockeys, if they're out there riding their bikes, keeping up with cars, to the people that are their families, the grandparents that are taking their kids to the park. We want to make sure that we provide access for everyone. So again, looking at the off-street trails, which are typically your recreational trails, shared use path, sidewalks that coming out of your homes, providing that access to enhanced sidewalks, which would connect into the off-street trails. And again, as I mentioned before, the bike routes and bike facilities is more on the transportation connection of utilizing cycling as part of that. One thing that we also looked at is looking at access points. Trailheads. Where can we, if we need to drive our vehicles to a park, where can we get on safely on a trail? Where can we access the trail areas? And so we looked at a number of different things, utilizing either existing facilities, such as schools and parks, or the potential to look at new areas for these trailheads and access areas. Some of the trends that that's going on right now, we call these complete streets. It's really looking at the integration of bike facilities sidewalks, places of congregation, say, large areas such as, urban developments, and creating that synergy, making people walk or ride or bike from a destination to another destination. So we want to make sure that this is complete in access for biking, walking, places where people can gather socially, or this may be a mode of transportation to and from people's work occupation there. A lot of these areas are, we look at shared use paths, ways that people are utilizing the right-of-way along a roadway network. There's some pros and cons of this. It's great ways to have large, wide sidewalks or paths to either walk or ride your bike on. But for some areas, some of the negatives, that it requires a large right-of-way. And I will say that I think Corporate Drive is one good example of where they're planning on, it's a new roadway segment that goes out from Corporate Drive, expands, goes across Railroad Park up into the Carrollton, Hebron area. They're planning this as a kind of a complete street type of facility where it has sidewalks, it has potentially bike facilities, it also has places for cars. So we're being forward thinking in our process of how can we integrate biking as well as handle the vehicular capacity for traffic and movement. So this is kind of a diagram of different types of trail networks that we studied. Again, we looked to mention the off-street trails, and we showed there in red the existing facilities. You can kind of see there the existing hike and bike trails that's in the area. Again, someone had mentioned they're not continuous, but contiguous. And how they'll connect into future connections if we were to expand that. Then we had a series of maps where we looked at enhanced sidewalks that ran parallel to an existing roadway network. And I mentioned before that enhanced sidewalk is anywhere from preferably 8 feet, but in some cases where the right-of-way is very limited, we're getting down to 6 feet. The other part is the bicycle routes. These are either signed or shared use facilities that are where we're identifying potential bike routes and connection points to other destinations and nodes. And as I mentioned before, we did the canoe trip that was below the Lake Louisville, and we traveled down the Elm Fork about 11 miles?
6 miles.
6 miles. Felt like 11. But it was really, again, a very scenic opportunity, and being able to see another side of Louisville that you typically do not be able to see there. So if we take all these different maps of the off-street, on-street facilities, the bike routes, enhanced sidewalks, you get this large network of trails and connectivity. And we also identified, again, some of the major things such as all the schools in the community, because we want places where kids have a safe access and route to schools. We identified all the parks within the area. We identified the downtown area. We highlighted the mall and another Railroad Park. And at the time, I believe, DCTA was looking at the rail line, and so we're looking at destinations. If I were to come from Denton or come from Dallas, if I were to take my bike on the train and I wanted to get off the train at one of these stations and ride my bike to Lake Park, I could do that. So we want to make sure that we had a well-connected network and well-thought-out plan to provide access to various parts of the city and to adjacent communities. This is important when we looked at, I know Bobby mentioned that we received a grant for a couple of projects, but having that thought process of thinking forward, how can we leverage our planning activities for future funding opportunities. So this map identifies, again, a little bit more detail. The red is the built trails that's in the community. The green is the funded trails, and again, that follows along, part of that follows along the DCTA trail line, which is either under construction, under design, or funded, so there's some various stages right now. And also, on a larger scale, and then when I say large, this is the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, there's something called the VeloWeb, which is a regional trail network that connects all different parts of all the different communities within the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So it is a large regional plan. I think we updated it, I believe about 2 years ago. They took our plan and they've they've added our information to the updated plan there. The area that's identified in yellow, this is one of part of it is part of our grant that we achieved. And it also looked at different connections throughout various parts of the community there. And I also mentioned the access points, trail access in and around Leela was very important as well. So taking all this information, you really couldn't identify and fund all different parts of it. So let's create a spine network that provides major access points, connects major trail corridors to various parts of the city. So we developed we call this a spine trail system. And this spine trail system, again, is the major backbone for the development of trails and connectivity in the area. We divided it up into, we call these more projects if we were to break projects, and these vary anywhere from about 1.5 miles to 3.5 miles in length. And we did this thinking about future grant opportunities. If we were to build and go after a grant, we can't do a $5 million grant, but maybe we can do $1.5 million or $2 million grant. So that's what our thought process was behind that. And we also looked at, where does it make sense to make connection points, but also look at potential nodes or trailheads where we could safely access these trails. So we put a lot of thought in how we developed this spine trail network system. And we started to give it different names and basically we alphabetized these different corridors, and this is kind of our first blush of defining our spine trail network. So we took each segment and we looked at if we've got this series of trail networks, how do we prioritize these? What's going to be our first phase of development? So we looked at things such as what are some of the major destinations here? We've got DCTA as a destination, as a place to have access. We've got proximity to Lake Park. You've got connectivity to other types of trails there. You've got other development. You've got a school there. So we did this for all of the different spine trail segments, and we broke that down and identified that. Gave a brief write-up. Looked at some of the issues here. We looked at some of the partnership possibilities, but in this case it was LISD. And then again, we looked at a planning level of cost for each of these trail spine segments, as well as how would that interface with other trail components throughout the trails plan. So we did this for each of these different trail segments in those areas. Again, looked at ease of implementation, connectivity to major destinations. Is this land available? Is this right-of-way available for that area? And for all these, we prepared a cost estimate for each of these. So we took that and we said, well, let's break this up into our priority. And again, this was in 2011, and Bob and staff looked at, well, we know that DCTA has some funding available. So at the time, when we were doing it, we looked at we started this prioritization, but as time evolved and time has passed, that this is now the funded or the major trail spine component as probably a phase one. So this is kind of the phase one segment. The orange components are kind of your secondary or your high priority trail corridors after this other part is funded. So I can't recall the length, but that's about about 10 or 12 miles of funded and actually under construction trails along the DCTA trail corridor.
Oh, do you mind talk specifically about the fact that is made up of different types of trail all along? Some of it are on the road, some of it are enhanced sidewalk.
Karen Lenny's very familiar with
Or
that.
Lenny,
Yeah, I'll have to say, I mean, a lot of it is, again, it's, Donna mentioned that this is a kind of a compilation of major trail spine, which is 12 foot in width. And also we're going on street at some components or having some enhanced sidewalks. up and around. This kind of follows a roadway network, so we're paralleling the road here. And then it gets back on track with another major trail spine. So again, we're using, where we have it, the ease of land, ease of access. We're utilizing existing streets, corridor right away where feasible. And then where we have the opportunity to tie back into a major trail spine, then we're actually doing that as well.
And we took advantage of what we had in place as we moved through with this. The reason this jogs around here is don't touch that, huh? We're taking advantage of the trail system out at Railroad Park. Instead of building a new trail, we can take advantage of that and come around. And then we're gonna come up and around, and there'll be a segment up here. We're gonna have a dedicated bike lane where it makes sense to do that, and we've got the room to do it. There's not enough right-of-way to make the trail wide enough off-road. So we're gonna have pedestrian travel on the sidewalk, standard sidewalk, and we can have a dedicated bike lane. It's not part of the spine trail, but the Garden Ridge Trail that we've been talking about, a big portion of that is gonna be enhanced sidewalk. There's no place else to put it. When we get down South 407 and we can jump into the median, it'll go down the median and then it'll come back onto the sidewalk. So depending on where you go, we could be using any one or all of the different trail types to make the connectivity.
So you're saying that, if I understand correctly, there would be points where a bike lane could also be pedestrian? Yes, no?
Typically, no, the bike lane is, at that point, you would have the bike lane, which is in the roadway network, and then you would have a parallel sidewalk. So the
Okay.
pedestrians would use the sidewalk, and the cyclists would utilize the roadway area.
But the trail,
The trail,
the
Trail
standard
matches.
trail is both.
Yeah.
yes, the trail is
A
both.
trail is pedestrian and bicycle.
Yes.
Is there anything in the plan that relates to education? Any education component? Because I have, in riding, I have had pedestrians on trails completely block the trail and don't move. They won't.
I've almost been killed that way. I've almost been killed several times.
Yeah.
Yeah, there should be some type of education to, we do this all the time with the.
Trail etiquette.
Absolutely, trail etiquette, man. You typically have that at your kiosks, at your trailheads, how to walk on a trail, if you let people pass on your left, that type of thing. But trail education is gonna be key.
Yeah.
We also looked at, educational components as interpretive signage, have certain either geological or natural features to celebrate, even the historical parts of Louisville.
If I may, I'm not sure it's the appropriate time. Denton has a similar set of trails along the railroad track going through there. Denton is almost unrideable at points because you have to stop, make 90-degree turns, make 80-degree turns, make 90-degree turns, and then you can cross a busy street. With that in mind, I hope we don't make these mistakes because it is just unrideable.
And I agree with that, I ride that.
All
So
right.
you literally have to get off your bike and
Yes.
walk
Open
in.
the gate.
It's not a good thing.
Well, or you have to open the gate at the train station.
Yeah.
It's not a place where you can go and exercise for a good length of time without. And we will be crossing some roadways here, so I hope we can have.
Yeah, we're trying to provide as much unimpeded access and flow as possible, but, again, will be some conflict points. And, part of this planning process, and I think there's a slide or two later on, that 35 right now is a major conflict point, either through head clearance, there's not enough clearance to be able to pass if you're on a cycle, let alone walking. But also, at grade, make sure that there's adequate facility space for either a cyclist and or a pedestrian as they walk through there. So we did look at all the different components of safety and, how to, we want to make sure that we're moving along the trail as best as possible.
Okay.
I have a quick question, just out of curiosity, segment L or 13, that's the one that's not it's labeled high priority, but it's not really connected to any of the other high priority or funded trails, so what,
That wasn't something that Lenny did, but when you look at this,
I live over there, so I'm happy to see it, but, you know, I was just curious why it would be 13 over 14.
because it's the beginning of the connectivity for the east part of Louisville, we've got a big neighborhood out of here by East Hill Park. We're hoping
Yeah,
to
that's where I
begin
live.
development of East
Yeah.
Hill Park. We're hoping to connect with the colony and begin to provide some trail connectivity over on the east side and not have everything just centered.
So are y'all
Yeah.
gonna try to connect to that trail that the colony has kind of along the lake?
We talked, Shoreline Trail, I've worked with Pam Nelson and those folks in the colony, and that was the big vision, is to have, again, not only connectivity within your community, but how can we reach out and make connections to the adjacent communities? We did the same thing for Coppell, over here at Highland Village, Flower Mound.
Yeah.
And if you look, there's a lot of connectivity through here, and without this segment over here,
Yeah.
there's nothing on the east side. So
Yeah.
we were trying to balance the program until
Okay.
you could pull it all together.
Okay.
And we're also thinking about grant opportunities, because when I look at regional connections, that scores higher versus, something that's more internal here, unless it has a major destination node to it.
Okay.
So you're saying the connection between 6 and 9 is not as important as the one between 13 going into the colony?
This is a critical connection, but there's also, what's not shown here, there is a trail that connects into Memorial Park, I believe.
Right.
Yes.
There's an existing
There's an
trail
existing
there.
trail here, but this would utilize the current drainage corridor and provide that unimpeded
Yeah.
access, as we talked about before, that would fill in 6 and 9, but right now they would have some type of trail access.
Actually, that part of Corporate Drive is what got me involved in this whole process. So, trying to ride that little stretch there.
That little stretch?
Yep.
But basically what I'm asking though is that 13 becomes more important in terms of grant, if you want to apply for a grant because it connects to the colony.
Well, that's
Or
one.
priority-wise.
That's one criteria, but we would evaluate it because, again, as we looked at Garden Ridge Trail, that wasn't even on here. We saw an opportunity because TxDOT was building the area. We've got a destination of the DCTA, the transit station. Again, there's opportunities to tie into the adjacent community. So we looked at all these different opportunities and felt that that's a high-ranking priority up here. We will still look at, these other access points and evaluate those as this next round of grants comes up.
It may be easier to get funding because it's more regional in nature.
Yeah, that's where I was kind of heading with it because of being regional and connecting to another town. But any grant you can get frees up dollars for something else.
Absolutely.
And that becomes important.
Yes.
Very.
And a selling point. If we have to sell this,
Mhm.
that's a selling point.
Speaking of 35, we looked at 8 locations where the trails would either cross or go under 35, either at grade, above grade, or below grade. And then we identified those along that whole 35 corridor. We coordinated that internally with the engineering plan department of City of Louisville, but also with TxDOT and DCTA. And one thing I want to point out that Bob may speak more on, but on the Vision 2025 plan, they recommended a crossing at College Street. So that's an additional crossing that, would really enhance, provide additional connectivity to different parts of Louisville.
Derek knows all about that since he was the chair of that.
Yeah, I'm the cheerleader for that.
He's a cheerleader.
So, but college doesn't
You can't do
cross
it.
where? Over the highway?
Over 35,
Over
yeah.
Okay, but so that's a complete new structure. Oh, okay, I was just trying to,
Yeah.
I was trying to place, I was
Yeah,
like, there's
that's-
nothing that goes across there, so, okay,
correct.
so that would be a complete new
New facilities.
structure. All right, gotcha.
We asked our consultant about how much they thought it would cost to do something like that, and I believe the number was around 4 million.
About what?
About 4 million.
Okay.
But-
I know
but
there's
the-
$1 million price tag just to go over a 2-lane street in Florida.
But the key to these plans are they're not static plans.
Right.
It's a guide to go by, and every time we move forward, we have to reevaluate what the conditions are and what makes the most sense as we move forward.
But one, again, Bob had mentioned this as well, that when they were planning and going through the environmental process of 35, I'm on another committee, doing some projects for TxDOT in the city of Dallas, or actually for Dallas County, that it's important to put these crossings in now in the early stages and to plan for these. Because as, again, funding becomes available, they think back, well, did you think about this crossing? And if you have, then that, again, elevates your point scoring on these different components. And, you know, a benefit from that was that, again, we received a grant this last year for the Garden Ridge Trail. And also, I believe in 2013, the Federal Land Access Program, Lake Park, again, it looks at some infrastructure, roadway improvements, parking, some drainage facilities, but it also had a small trail component, which ties into our trail spine system. So, again, being proactive and planning ahead, we can look at ways to leverage this plan to acquire some grant funding for in the future. And I believe there's another round of grants coming out. So, are there any more questions on the trails before I move on to folks? For the next 10, 15 minutes, I'm going to talk about the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Vision Plan. Again, this was a piggyback component of the Trails Plan. Our first part of our process is we want to make sure that we drive around, walk. We did a lot of walking and actually riding to look at the trail facilities, but now we're focusing on parkland areas, open space areas. And so our general understanding and impression is that there's a good distribution of parks within the city of Louisville. Some of these are older in stature. So they have a lot of the basic park amenities such as a playground, a pavilion, parking, small walking paths that's internal. But Railroad Park, you know, it's kind of your flagship park that you have in the community. There's some enhanced amenities such as the skate facilities that's there. The ball fields are a really nice attraction to not only the city of Louisville, but also regionally and nationally. Teams are coming here to compete for athletics and that sort. You know, other
And the
things-
puppy park.
Excuse me.
The puppy park.
And the puppy park, absolutely. And you know, we'll also look at, you know, how these parks being maintained. And as we move forward in the future, you know, sustainability is going to be is key. Looking at low maintenance, but also how much water is being utilized, because, you know, I don't think we're going to be filling up Lake Louisville. Hopefully, I would love to see it filled, but you know, make sure that we're being water smart, water conscious on the types of plants that we use for parks development. And, you know, also your recreational centers, you know, they're small, but, you know, but they're well maintained. This map right here looks at your existing park facilities. We have the smaller circles you kind of see here that have the green dots, and those are your neighborhood parks. They vary anywhere from 2.5 to anywhere up to 5 to 8 acres. And they're probably, we're looking at a half-mile walking distance from the center. So if I lived, you know, at these homes out here, I would feel comfortable walking a half-mile to visit this particular park. So that's how we look at the service radii for a neighborhood park. The community parks, which are a lot larger facilities, they're anywhere from 20 plus acres. And they can be a large athletic complex to, such as Railroad Park, to Lake Park, up even to Memorial Park. It has large open space areas, a walking path. And people typically will drive their cars to a community park here. They are somewhat of a de facto neighborhood park, but people typically would drive to a community park. And that service radii is roughly about a mile if you were going from the outside edge to the center of that circle area. So there's a great distribution of parks on the, on the northern and kind of that western part of Louisville. And looking at the southern area, there's a lot of industrial and kind of a commercial retail areas. Same thing out to the east. So there's not a lot of development for parks within that reach of the city. At the time of the study, Leela was not involved or was not incorporated as part of the plan. We know that Leela is a great resource. I worked for the Corps of Engineers and had the opportunity to visit Leela, 7, 8, almost 10 years ago, and it's a tremendous resource that you guys have here in your backyard. But during the time of the study, Leela was not looked at. So looking at your current, again, level of service, we looked at the number of facilities that you have here within the community. We also looked at the number of acres here. So we have 14 neighborhood parks that's in the city. That's about 106 acres. There's about 5 community parks, and that's 732 acres. So you're thinking that's quite a bit or a large amount of park acreage, but when you look at the level of service, that number is quite daunting as you start to look at comparatively to other communities within the region as far as parkland dedication. And this was added in here, and we looked at Leela, and that's plus or minus 2,000 acres of parkland that has some, has some limited access to that area. Now we look at the neighborhood park and the community park as close to home parks. That again, that's a de facto. You can either walk to it or you can drive to it. And when we look at these two combined together, it's about 8.3 acres per 1,000. Other parks, typically they are either your linear parks, which follow along the drainage corridors, the sports complex, other special use type parks. We've got anywhere about 6.3 acres per 1,000. And when you combine all these together, you have about 14.5 acres per 1,000. Other cities, we just picked Frisco and McKinney because of proximity and size. They're right now averaging about 14 to 19 acres. They're in a process of updating their parks plan, so they're probably going to be upping that number. And McKinney, they're about 25 acres per 1,000 as part of their level of service. So we started to gauge that, and we came up with your level of service, looking at about 20 acres per 1,000. Currently they were at 14.6 wanting to achieve 20 acres per 1,000. And we broke it further down and looked at neighborhood parks, community parks, and other types of parks there. And that's how we came up with that number.
One of the real challenges with Louisville, as you look at additional parks, is available land. And we're a city that's almost built out, so it's great to say we need these additional parks. But we're literally sometimes talking about having to buy homes, and the land is just not there.
Right. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because we office in Richardson, and they had the same issue. They're pretty well built out, actually, and
Very
trying
complicated.
to acquire land in Richardson is almost impossible. And so what they've done, and they've been pretty creative in their approach to this, but they've looked at maybe some contiguous areas of lots that are either run down or abandoned homes. And they've bought these lots out, and now they turn these into some nice, wonderful green spaces or playgrounds, and they preserve the trees in some of these areas. And it's a nice amenity or pocket park that they've added to the community. And it really, from that standpoint, it brings up the value of the homes that's around it now. So that's something
What's the
to,
recommendation?
I like the pocket park concept, just because it puts kids in their neighborhood.
so again, looking at the target level of service, again, we based this on 2013. We're looking at about 530 something acres in deficit. Just looking at pure park acreage, and summarized in, 96 acres of neighborhood parks, about 67 acres of community parks, and 370 plus acres of special purpose parks. When we looked at and projected this out to 2030, we're still, again, we've got two numbers here, and I'm gonna explain that the red off to the sides, just kind of put blinders on, don't look at that quite yet. But there's about 813 acres of deficit if we're gonna try to reach this in 2030. Pretty substantial amount of land here. When we bring into the new projection of population, again, this is based on 111,000, and we're looking at about 167, almost 168,000 of new projected growth. That number, more than doubles. So that's a pretty substantial amount of acreage of parkland that we're trying to have to meet, in order to meet the projected forecast of the population there.
Lenny, so you're saying that you're including Castle Hills in that 167?
Yes, this right here is including the Hebron area, the Castle Hills, and also the development.
Have you also included the parks that
Are already.
are already over there too as part of the acreage?
That was not included in there, so we have not,
Okay,
again, we just looked at pure numbers on the, and there's not a lot of park, there, and we look at the park facilities, when we look at, their parks are a little bit smaller, and they're
Pocket
truly
parks.
pocket parks.
Yep.
So, again, there's gonna be a huge number to make up.
That's something you may want to call out if we were to use this stuff going forward for council.
Sure. I'll get some.
Just call that out, and if you have an estimate of what the acreage looks like in Castle Hills, I don't think it's a lot, but still, let's be accurate. Yeah, it's compare apples to apples.
The main point that we wanted to make, and for y'all to understand, is what we're showing from the original master plan, what the deficit is gonna grow based on the new population growth. This may not be totally accurate. We may not end up with 167,000 in population, but it's important to realize that it's gonna be somewhat greater than what was originally projected.
Sure.
And always remember that deficit is based on a calculation of whatever cities you select to compare to. Just remember that. That is a manipulatable number. I think there are only 2 cities that were included. Talk about that, Lenny.
Yes, what's shown here was the two cities of Frisco and McKinney, but we also had
So that
a,
open spaces.
yes, but we also looked at other communities as well. Some of them may not be comparative to either population. I know we looked at Arlington as one component, Carrollton, South Lake, but other areas. But so we just took the two that we thought best fit Louisville and that we're familiar with as well. We have a whole list of data for all the different communities, but we felt that Frisco and McKinney best matched you guys. Yes, ma'am.
He actually had the same question I did about Castle Hills, but is Leela considered an open space?
Leela was not considered as part of this component.
Okay.
Again, Leela has certain restrictions. I know that the city is starting to, and the UNT and the Corps are starting to collaborate on how to best utilize that facility. But Leela was not considered in the evaluation.
What you have to look at is the different uses and evaluate how all of this is gonna come together and what Louisville needs. Leela is a great asset for a park. It's a special use park. You're talking about neighborhood parks, community parks. You can't go out to Leela and fly a kite. You can't go out there and have a flag football game. You can't kick a soccer ball out there. If you
I thought, I was thinking, like this is parks and open space. I see Leela as more of an open space where you would go hiking or bird watching or whatever.
What I'm saying is you can't just look at the total acreage, because that's gonna be skewed with something like Leela for what the needs of the community are.
Okay.
You
I see
you
what
may
you're
have
saying.
your total acreage out there that looks really good per capita, but you're not gonna have everything that the community needs. I can tell you, you can talk to any soccer coach, any football coach, we need more practice space in town. How are we gonna get there? We're not ever gonna have enough, I tell you, we just can't. But that's a need, so how do you try to balance all of that? We're gonna do really well in some areas. We're gonna do really well in the open space with Leela.
Right.
We're gonna struggle in other areas to try and provide some amenities. And that's gonna be the balance as you look through all of that. How are we gonna be able to do that? We're not gonna meet the quota in every one of these areas.
Well, we probably also didn't include the new acreage along Valley Parkway corporate in those numbers. did
No, we didn't, because that hadn't been dedicated.
we? It had been dedicated, but
That's an additional 20
that's an
acres.
additional, the property we bought over on Valley Parkway corporate, so that's another,
Is that by the senior center?
I'm sorry.
By the senior center?
Right across the
Yes.
street.
Yeah.
So there's no easy answer here.
And I
There's
just-
no right,
and
there's no
hard
wrong.
and fast rules. I mean, we're talking about a deficit, but that's not like, that's a hard and fast number that you have to meet. It's a guide, is
Right.
really what it is.
Well, and the purpose of this whole thing really is to just increase the appeal of our community.
That's exactly
Right.
Quality of life.
Yeah,
Quality of life.
Do we have any numbers that shows like the usage of these trails, by the citizens in Louisville?
That's really difficult to come by. There are some cities that have tried to put counters out on the trails and how do you do that?
Right.
If y'all been out on the trails, you know they're used. They're busy all the time. I can tell you, if we had another 2 railroad parks, we'd fill them up. We know that's not gonna happen. But I'm telling you, they would be full and we'd be bringing in more tournaments. Soccer teams would be happy, football teams. It's hard to get some of those numbers of a facility like Railroad Park that has events at it. We come closer to being able to capture the numbers, but just on a hike and bike trail is difficult.
Okay.
Is there any way, talking about Railroad Park, any way to increase its footprint? I mean, it's, the way it is now, is there any land around it we can bring into that and make it bigger?
We've talked about possibilities. There's not a lot of land that would necessarily be used for athletic facilities. It would be more open space, Which- which would,
That's what I'm thinking, I mean, even if it's a playground or
Or just open space.
or just an open
Walking.
space, yeah. Walking, lounging, put out your chair and read, just being able to claim some more land out there. I know there's a lot of wetland out there.
But that can be okay too.
I'm impressed by the practice.
He closes his door and practices.
it's slow, it's not me.
It's cold.
Here's the part. You got landfills here, you got landfills up here, that's always gonna be open space. That's gonna help contribute to it with the river corridor that comes down through here, comes down to another big landfill. So there's gonna be a lot of potential with open space. Here's the Leela area all the way out through here. Here's Lake Park. If you remember the green centerpiece concept, everything tying together. So we've got all of that coming down through there. There's some other pieces through the river corridor that we might be able to pick up. We're gonna have more open space than any other type of park category. If y'all are familiar with what's trying to be worked out over here with FedEx, it's gonna be some more open space that is gonna be available for a trail to be through, but not active recreation, it's gonna be more the passive. So our trade out is gonna be ultimately, we're gonna be a great city with a lot of open space. But how do we compensate for that in some of the other areas? As Donna mentioned, we're landlocked in most areas. So how do we make the most of the park areas that we do have? How can we be ready to take advantage of areas that do become available? And that's the purpose of the plan. That's the purpose of trying to establish a level of service, a target level. Again, it's a target. We could use a lot of things. Got a great big old long wish list. We know we're not gonna get there. But what are the priorities? And after a while, we'll get into park board priorities. And you'll see that their initial priorities wasn't additional land acquisition. It was trying to balance and take advantage of the things that we can do. But there's gonna be some drainage corridors we may be able to do more with. When the landfill build out in years to come, there are gonna be opportunities probably for a lot of things we've been talking about for years. A lot of trails through the landfills, bike trails, downhill, bike runs, a lot of different things, BMX bikes.
They did.
So there are gonna be opportunities there, and what's happening is the master plans are trying to position us so we're able to take advantage of those.
And when you talk about the landfills, and Steve can talk specifically about this, one is within 10 years, waste
10 to
management,
15.
probably 10 years. That's not that long a period of time when you talk about city planning.
And that's 800 acres.
And you've got to realize the major effect on wildlife with these open areas. The landfill has dug a lot of lakes. We dug some lakes out here at Railroad Park. It's gonna be a birder's paradise out there. We've already got a lot out at Leela. There's gonna be more through there. If we're able to protect all of this, protect the river corridor, there's gonna be a lot more wildlife in there. And coincidentally, 2 weeks ago, I had a park crew leader show me a photo of a deer at Central Park on the back trail out there.
How about that?
Wow.
Just wandered down, huh?
He'd been hearing stories from some of the park users, and he finally spotted her out there and took a photo. And so that's the importance of the open space as well, and being able to preserve that.
I have a question. On this slide, is that in New York, these two pictures?
Yes, that's the highlight in New York.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's what I was gonna say. In New York, there's hardly any space outside of Central Park that's green. And I've walked this, and it's very long.
Yes.
And I think it's a great idea. It's like beautiful. And I was thinking, since like you were saying that acreage is such a big problem, is this gonna be explored here?
I think, we talked about, we're doing a project in Tarrant County Community College. It's called Sticky Spaces. And it's little unique pockets that aren't utilized for anything, but how can we develop this into something wonderful, something unique? And I think what the city has built out as you're becoming to become and landlocked, there's these opportunities to look at these sticky spaces for creative recreational components.
This is really beautiful. I walked there during the day and at night. It's very nice.
So we looked at the level of service, and again, this is just a forecast of development in Hebron, Castle Hills area, but again, that number is pretty daunting there. And this map just kind of reinforces that. It looks at this massive development that's here in purple, as the Hebron and Castle Hills area is about 46,000, and the area that's in purple here, and a lot of that's really around the DCTA station is about 4,000, projected population increase around that area, but there's about 9,000, almost 10,000 total in that southern sector of Louisville. So again, it's a pretty small amount of population increase that's going to occur here in the next 10 to 15 years. This map just looks at the neighborhood service area deficit These circles are again the pocket parks. And we look at walking distance to a pocket park or neighborhood park. These areas that are in the yellow don't have access to a neighborhood park here. So it's kind of show the deficit areas of, they're not within a half-mile walking distance to a neighborhood park. And it can also shown there on the eastern half in that Castle Hills, Hebron area. We looked at how can we fix this component, and it's kind of hard to see here on the screen here, but maybe a little bit better picture on your handouts. But looking at a couple proposed parks, neighborhood parks in the Central Core area, looking at some proposed neighborhood parks on the eastern side of the city, and some down here on the southern area, just kind of north and south of 121 and also 3040 within that core there. We did the same thing for the community parks, looking at the service radii, 1 mile walking distance, and you kind of see, again, the deficit from a residential standpoint on the western half, and the same thing on the eastern area and down here in this lower portion of Louisville. Looking at, the open space areas or the areas that aren't being served or utilized by parks. This plan only looked at one area, and that's over by the East Hill Park. They have the largest amount of land to potentially develop, and I think that's been on the city's drawing board for at least for a number of years that I'm aware of. But it's a great opportunity to really work with the Corps and develop out west into the south, more expand recreation components on East Hill. I think at one time, Bob, there's looking at maybe some sports athletic fields potentially, or even some other type of.
It was the original master plan that was submitted to the Corps when we obtained the lease, but that was prior to building the Toyota Louisville Railroad Park. So all of that would be reevaluated as to what would go in there. Instead of soccer fields, it might be cricket fields. We have a heavy Indian population out in that area that's very supportive of cricket. Cricket is a growing sport. In fact, we've had cricket club playing out at Lake Park for 15 years now. So if we take a look at where do we go with it, is it going to be the original plan? Probably not, but there's probably going to be a need for some type of athletic fields out there.
In looking at all these maps and the deficit areas, I'm glad I ride bikes because nothing hits me, so I can get to them easily on a bike. But it's not walking distance.
So some of the recommendations that came out of the plan was looking at, acquiring land for a recreation center, looking at a special events type park facility, looking at special purpose parks, trailheads. Again, that falls back into the Trails Master Plan. Open space acquisition, acquiring land for future development. Lake Park improvement, how can we improve Lake Park and either as a special events area or, again, looking at those special needs for recreation. River access points was heavily supported in the plan as well as the Trails Plan. And this was not particularly planned, but how can we incorporate Leela as an open space and recreational amenity for the city. Other recommendations, again, looking at spray water parks, maybe improvements to either a new or additional disc golf course or enhancements to the existing one. Loop trails in the existing parks. Playgrounds, again, it's always an amenity that people are looking at to improve or enhance. Pavilions, even shade trees, providing that those types of recreation. And again, a special events park.
Can you explain to the group what you mean? What features is a special events park?
Special events, I think Railroad Park has a large, no, I'm sorry, not Railroad Park, an amphitheater. Some place where people can gather for large events, concerts, different types of venues. It may be another dedicated sports or athletic component. So anywhere you can have large gatherings, even this it's not, it's small, but the new planned park improvements across the, out in front of City Hall is kind of a special events type of venue.
Saw that.
That was an internal dialogue going on there.
I heard it.
I was talking to you. I was like,
Now, for years, we used the amphitheater down at Vista Ridge. And the problem there is ADA, correct?
That's correct.
Is there any way to have that modified, or is it just too expensive?
It's very expensive.
It's very expensive and we don't have parking down there,
Yeah, there isn't parking,
which
that's
is
right.
a big issue with it. And if we were to do that there now, I think we'd be taken away from what we've been trying to do here at the Art Center and what we're gonna be doing across the street at the Plaza.
Can we reclaim that in any other way?
We've been looking at several options. We haven't found the right one yet.
But there is, at least, it's in the binoculars someplace.
It is, it's been looked at, and it will be for park purposes, because it was given to the city for park purposes. It would take a vote to actually change that from anything but park use.
now, is it operational at all now? It's completely closed down and
Closed
shut off
down,
the whole
a lot
building?
of people use it as a trailhead.
Okay,
But
right.
as an operating facility, we would hold events.
You can't do anything there or rent it out or anything, just do the fact of the ADA? Okay,
It's not ADA.
gotcha.
We also took a look at the aquatic and indoor recreation center facilities, and this map kind of identifies the different locations, and they're pretty well centrally located. There's some in the southern, western area of the community, but there's the Old Town Aquatic Center, there's Fred Herring Recreation Center, Sun Valley Aquatic Center, and you got the Senior Center and the Rec Center at Memorial Park. There's nothing that's out towards the east, nothing look more to the east there. But some of the big picture recommendations, expand the current senior activity center. Looking at how can we expand those areas for additional recreational components. Modify the rooms at the Herring Center to be more efficient in the space and utilization. Build a new state-of-the-art recreation/aquatic center as a new component. And explore opportunities of indoor pool and concerts at the rec center. So, what we're hearing is that, that you guys need a new rec facility, either rec/aquatics or maybe on the recreational side for the future year.
And then can you talk a little bit about expansion of the senior activity center and why you think that might be a need?
Bobby, you may jump in when we tag team that, but again, as we're starting to age in population, and there's going to be a need to expand those activities and to allow for more room within these spaces here. And we saw the opportunity to really enhance the senior center and to be able to do that.
Which is what you're doing across the street from Memorial Park, right? That is getting expanded, does it not include the?
You're talking about the property that?
Yes, the future plans there.
It's really not specifically planned at this point. We bought the property.
Okay.
You could put some type of facility there, but we'll talk a little bit about how you can expand the senior center, but you would do it really through a connection of those two, the rec center and the senior center that sit side by
Okay.
side, connecting those two facilities.
Correct.
And then you'd have an expanded senior facility, but obviously one less recreation.
Right.
center.
Okay, so the property that was purchased doesn't have an intent right as of right now.
It does not have a
Okay.
specified intent.
It has, everybody has their intent on it. Okay.
Who has their eye on it? Somebody-
Right. Okay.
When you look at the trends in the senior centers, they've changed quite a bit. And as Lenny said, our population shift, there's gonna be more and more seniors are more and more active, looking for a lot of different activities. And when you talk to seniors, and those of us that are, Steve,
Yeah?
Heck, everybody else will know. Is that Gina?
I'll talk to you tomorrow.
I do better than you call anybody else out. But I'm in that group. But what type of activities do seniors like to do? From when they were 50 years old or 45, those activities and those interests really have not changed. They have the same interest. The way they approach it may be different. So they may not slide into second anymore when they're playing softball, but they may still be playing softball. So we need to be able to offer those activities in the standard senior center that we have that was built a number of years ago. It wasn't as much of an active senior center. So we're doing more and more programming over at Memorial Park with senior activities. We're getting more and more people when we do luncheons. We don't have a full kitchen at the senior center. We're not able to do much. But we can't even sit everybody when we have the big luncheons. We have to go over and use the gym at the rec center. We don't have enough room in our pool room for everyone that comes out to play pool. They go next door to Memorial and use the pool tables over there. And you can look at what senior centers are becoming, and probably the top one in the nation right now is over in Grand Prairie. It's not called a senior center, it's called the Summit. But everyone knows it's an adult activity center. And they pay $200 a year membership, but they've got indoor pool, they got a full-size gym, they have a full-size fitness center, they have a 100-seat movie theater in there, they have a wine bar in there, they've got a lot of different things over there. What we would be looking at wouldn't come anywhere close to that, but it would expand beyond what we're able to offer at the current facility. And what Lenny did, he had Dwayne Brinkley take a look at our facilities. And Dwayne designs facilities all across the country, and a lot of these recommendations were with Dwayne's help. And he suggested how we could expand the current center into the Memorial Recreation Center and have a lovely senior center that would take care of the active needs that we have. We have a big group that plays pickleball, and they travel to other cities, and we host senior pickleball tournaments. So we need to expand and have more active space for them. So the idea would be to take the building, expand it over into the other building so it's one big building, but then that would displace the current activities.
And we'll
at the
get
rec
into
center.
more of that detail at the individual project next week, so.
Bob, I'll let you speak on these next few slides here.
Or Steve, did you have somebody else that wanted to talk about the survey questions here?
No, I think they're just up there for the committee's review and understanding.
James actually talked to you about these, the first meeting, he talked about the second meeting, he talked about the survey that was done, and we just wanted to go back through and remind you that regardless of this survey or even prior citizen surveys that we've done, when you ask people what they want more than anything, it's trails. Number one is always gonna be trails. Now, number two, you might go to the next, there's just one slide. Would be, what was the second one, Bob? Was
There's one more
with the-
slide.
Yeah. Hiking bike trails is the number one. It seems like the athletic fields rank much lower than I would have thought they should. And campground we don't have a list of the 8 facilities that were asked, or that were surveyed, do you? Okay.
No, we don't.
Yeah, that's what we're really missing here, but One was campground, and the park board's gonna talk about, or Bob's gonna talk about the park board recommendation and why their number one priority was investment in your campground, even though when you look at the survey, you would see it was towards the bottom of prioritization with the public. And then this again, green initiatives and the importance of connectivity through your trails is ranked very high, extending the green. Driving neighbor, go ahead, Bob.
No, I would just wait until we get down here
Go ahead.
to the recreation center. It did show that there was interest in an indoor aquatic facility, and a recreation center was mentioned in open-ended responses more than any other item except trails.
So, Bob, with that?
I know that when we did those first meetings, that big, that's all I heard, trails, indoor aquatic. We need this, we need this, we need this, we need this. And it leaned, the people I heard from, it leaned to the 40 and up, is who I was hearing from. Age 40 and up. Trails, indoor aquatics, we wanna walk, we wanna do this. So it seems like this meets to what I heard in those big ideas.
It does, Karen, and again, historically, since I've been here, every survey we've done with residents, even to the specific survey that Lenny did, trails has always been by far the highest ranking need for the residents.
And that's pretty true nationwide.
Absolutely.
But when we did the 2025, I thought, and I'm not sure, they did a survey, or a population survey, and they did like 2/3 were adults. And it was like 1/3 of families that had children under 18. But that basically Louisville was growing towards where it was mostly a adult or senior community that
That's
would
correct.
want trails and less, we'll say, I'm not saying less of playgrounds or whatever, but it wasn't an emphasis on that. It was more of an emphasis on things that were just adult nature or senior nature in the 2025.
There was a shift
Mm-hmm.
in population that was discussed, you're correct.
Well,
And-
but Louisville's always done a good job with the youth recreation though. I mean, Louisville has historically done a great job with that. And now the other side of the population's saying, okay, we've done a good job at that, now let's see if we can do a good job with the rest of us.
So hearing all of that, and hearing what we talked about with our level of service projections with parks and knowing we probably won't get all the parks that we need, what direction do we go and how do we prioritize that? And we'll talk about that a little bit more, what the park board's thoughts were on that.
So any questions, more questions for Lenny?
I have a question. If you guys reviewed the High Line, was that an option for Louisville?
It was just some imagery that looked at the trends and how people are utilizing
Yeah.
trails, complete streets, sticky spaces as we call it.
Right.
And these unique problem areas that people have had in the past, but how they can change that. And now that's something that's unique and special for that particular community.
Okay.
That crossing of College Street across the freeway would kind of be like the High Line.
Yeah.
There you go.
Kind of, right.
We just have a name.
It could be like that.
Yes, it could.
Okay, ready for Bob.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Lenny.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, after we received our master plans, everybody was in total shock.
Especially Mr. King.
I'm sure.
And the park board they were anxious to move forward. What are we gonna do? When can we get started? And so the park board was directed to go back and take a look at the master plan to see what might be reasonably possible to accomplish. And so Donna and Gina came out and met with the park board, talked to them about the 4B funds and what may or may not be available, and then began to take a look at it and try to prioritize everything. So when they did that, they took a broad look at wanting to enhance the city's park system to improve the quality of life in the community and provide additional amenities for the citizens. And they had identified the core projects that they believed critical to the development of the park system. And in so doing, they tried to do a balance effect with it. Not just do all in one area, not do just all trails, not do trails all at once. Tried to balance, so you had a little bit of everything all the way through. And as I go through this, Rob, you were a part of this, you might have some comments, and if I get it wrong, let me know. So they took a look at the recommended list is approximately 71 million that they identified in today's dollars. And they went through a detailed 10-year implementation using existing park development funds and 4B cash to fund approximately 12.7 million in projects. In so doing, that still leaves 58 million in unfunded.
Can we pause here
projects.
for a moment, and I want to put in my editorial comment. This is what Louisville ISD spent on schools, just in Louisville, and this isn't complete. The Louisville High School locker room, 4.9 million. Louisville High School Ben Harmon campus, 38 million 8. Coming on down, Louisville Elementary, 17 million 4. Louisville High School renovations and additions, 47.2. We're not thinking small. 70 million. Contrast that. That is just in this city, and there's more, I could go on. If we take the whole of Louisville ISD, just in 2010, they spent 210 million. This is attainable, this is within our reach.
But don't Louisville ISD is in other cities besides
Well, I'm only
Louisville.
giving you the stuff they built in this city. Do you wanna go on? I mean,
No,
I mean, there's the Hebrew Knights that are at 47
So it matter to
million.
me. You
But I'm
can't put
telling you-
money for something, so it doesn't really matter
The
to me.
challenge, I think, for the committee, and Derek's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Is that it's the priority of what your community wants, and how much you're willing to spend. They're willing to spend those dollars on the schools, will they be willing to spend those dollars on parks? Or you've got to balance in everything else we've talked about,
Right.
the
Sure.
streets and
Streets,
drainage.
that's- yeah.
and,
Well, in a 5-year period, they've spent 385 million.
Oh, I believe it.
All right, in a 5-year period, the school district has spent 385 million. And that came out strong in support of that issue. That wasn't a nip and tuck, they slam dunked it.
Yeah, but you got kids dangle out there and that, you know what I
Exactly.
mean? That
And that's
changes
the
things for
thing.
people.
I'll dangle grandma.
But they have dangled and been turned down also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's an aspect that city
Oh,
parks
exactly.
or drainage or, you know,
It's
things
not
that,
as pretty
but it
as
doesn't
works,
make it
so.
not attainable. Like, I do get what you're saying, but, you know,
Mhm.
it just comes
A
back
pretty
to
new
finding that
school isn't
balance
the
of what you
same as
put
a
together
drainage
that
ditch.
people are gonna
Right.
pay for and support.
No, it's not, but once again, these other things address the other 2/3 of the community.
Exactly.
And I agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. But at the same time, when when it's time to go to the polls or vote for that bond, that may support Louisville ISD, who's coming out to vote? Are the parents coming out to vote who are pushing? Are people who will find more value in our next generation coming up, finding more value than, like you said, drainage or a road washing away? I don't know. And that's where our part
Driving
comes
over
in.
that road.
We gotta sell it.
We gotta sell it.
We do gotta sell it.
Mhm.
And we'll have lots of time to
But-
talk about this.
Well,
So-
once again, 58
Yeah.
million was the price of Louisville High School, just
Yeah.
by the time you add in the athletics.
It's crazy.
So one high school versus this big dream,
Did you add the auditorium?
I did not at the
No, the
auditorium.
auditorium is probably so, it's nice too.
So this was the approach that the park board took when trying to go back through all of the projects that were listed in the master plan. So here's their priorities that they came up with, and I don't know how much you want to talk about the reasoning behind it tonight.
A little bit.
Okay. Their top priority was Lake Park Campground and the Connor Pavilion for improvements out there. And recommended funding was 4B cash funds. The reason they saw it as their number one priority is they saw the campground as an asset to the community, not just for the residents who may be campers, but for the residents who have friends that come in from out of town that are campers, relatives that come stay. But beyond that, it's a revenue source. And the condition it's in now is an embarrassment to the community. We haven't gone up on the rates because of the condition that it's in. If it was improved, you could go up on your rates. We're taking in roughly $200,000 a year in revenue now. Grapevine with their campground, the two aren't exactly the same and wouldn't be operated the same, but there are some similarities. Grapevine is taking in over $1 million a year at their campground.
And there's updates.
What's the difference in fees though? Is there substantially more difference in their fees than ours?
Theirs
Because of the
is
quality?
more, they do have some cabins out
Substantially
there.
larger.
So yes, but if you were able to add utilities out here, typically, if you have sewer at a campground, you can charge more for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Our rates are ridiculously low
They're
right now.
expensive, I've seen them.
We're premium side, $18 a night, and if you're a senior citizen, you get it 50% off. So $9 a night, and we're pulling in, $200,000 a year.
Yeah.
You could easily change the structure of the rates, reduce the discount, and probably easily bring in $500,000 a year.
Any consideration, thoughts to like naming rights or sponsorship?
That's out of the core, so no.
And that can't, because it's, okay.
How much is it just for just this one? Like, this is just the improvements, or is it?
Next week, we were gonna get into all the.
The
all
actual-
The actual cost per recommendation, okay.
We'll get into it a little bit more. We're just briefly going over the park board's priority and some of the reasoning behind it.
And Bob mentioned that there's not been a large investment in the campground over the last number of years, and that's true. And the reason for that is you all are very aware of the city's focus on the Lake Development Project. And the attempt to bring in a hotel within the core property area, whether it's on the north side or the southern side. That project is still being worked. It's not something that certainly has been negotiated. It's in process. And so because we really don't know where in the end that hotel may end up, we did not want to go and invest large dollars into your campground. So that's really why it is certainly a facility that is fairly highly used, but it does need investment, but it's just, there hasn't been money set aside through 4B cash to invest in your campground. But it's been somewhat put on hold for the last 5 to 7 years because of the Lake Development Project, which has many, many challenges.
Bob, if I can add to this too, so, as part of the park board, we all went out, it was over a year ago, I think, right, last summer. Bob took us out to Grapevine Lake, and, the cabins, we got to tour the cabins and see all the facilities, and Bob, I think it was before you even joined, right?
Yeah,
And then we did a comparison to Lake Park, and quite frankly, there wasn't too much of a comparison. I mean, it was just a night and day difference, and you saw the opportunity at Lake Park versus what they have at Grapevine. And like Bob said, there could be some revenue generating opportunity behind it. And in no way is we're saying that this wasn't more important than trails. Okay, it was all about funding, what could be available right now, how quickly it could be done versus trails. Some of the trails, when you look at it, it's more of a long term, especially the more the build out. So we took a lot of different things into consideration, and that's why this was ranked up there pretty high. And just the condition of that one parking lot right near the pavilion, you can't even park in it. I mean, it just,
I was out there over on the dam run,
yeah.
and I hadn't been out that way since my kids played out in that area, and I was surprised
Yeah.
at where we haven't gone since then.
it's-
And I understand
Yeah.
when everything's kind of on hold, but it is a place to do some improvement.
Yeah, and what could be done there could be done very quick. And we thought as a group it would have a greater impact quickly to the community and to anyone that uses it, especially with all activity coming into Lake Park and Railroad Park. That's why we kind of put that a little bit higher.
And it's
Revenue
part
that-
of your green center piece.
Pardon?
It is part of your green center piece.
Right.
It absolutely is, yeah.
The revenue that this generates, how is it spent?
General fund, goes back to the general fund.
Okay, so any more that it does generate goes back to general fund, which then we've had some insight of where that can go.
There's provisions in our contract with the Corps that any revenue generated should go against the operations.
At least that minimum amount.
Yeah.
And when you balance the two, we've never had more revenue coming in than what we're spending out there. So that's why it hadn't been an
Right.
issue.
So it just kind of pays for itself.
Right.
Okay.
It does.
The second priority was improvements at the Lake Park Athletic Field, primarily on the soccer fields. We've been able to go in prior to this and renovate turf on 4 of the soccer fields. We held off on doing the other 4 till Railroad was opened up. And so they were looking at going back and doing that. So that's why it was their second priority. However, this has already, has been funded, and we'll bid it as soon as the Corps approves the plan. It's pending over at the Corps, but it's ready to go to bid as soon as we get that.
And Bob, we've invested prior before we went in your athletic fields at.
Not just the soccer field, but also the baseball field, that's correct, the grass infields, on the baseball fields, some shade structures that are out there. There's been quite a bit already invested out there. And again, the first 4 soccer fields were already renovated. And on the aerial photos, you can tell the difference in the turf when you're looking at it. It makes that big of a difference, so that's why this was their number 2 priority, to go ahead and get it done.
And what's the cost of that turf per field?
Gosh, I don't,
It's expensive.
it is very expensive. It's a hybrid, but it stands up to the wear very, very well.
It's just not
Repairs
grass.
itself. Third priority, again out of Lake Park, was improvements to the Lake Park day use area. The park board looked at it, kind of like the campground, it needs improvement. It is, as we talked about, one of our major park areas. Our residents do use it. We have a lot of non-residents that use it. It can be a revenue source as well. We've got ADA issues out there that need to be taken care of. We've got a really nice opportunity with the grant that we have with the road work that's gonna be done out there and the hike and bike trail that's coming in on the grant, that can really, go right along with it. But their vision was to put up more picnic tables with shelter tops over them, to make it a destination park, have a destination playground out there. Y'all are familiar with Kings Castle, the big playground in Highland Village that everybody goes to. Well, their vision was beyond that, to have a custom designed playground where you can mold in different things to it in a theme towards the lake. Kind of like when you go to Bass Pro and you walk through, and in the floor you see animal footprints, and then you look somewhere else on one of the beams and you might see a carving or something. Every time you go into that store, you discover something new. There are playgrounds like that. And their idea was to put a playground out there that could be a destination playground, and around that playground, put pavilions in there that could be rented out as additional revenue and as a destination for birthday parties or whatever it may be. And also other amenities that are needed in the park, with other picnic areas, fish cleaning station, and that type of thing. So that was their third priority. River access points was their fourth priority. There's tremendous opportunity on the river. We have 6 miles within the city limits, starting from the dam going down south to Hebron Parkway. So they were looking at putting an access point in, improved access at both points. And we'll have photos for you next week on what those are. Once that's in place, we can be on Texas Parks and Wildlife's website as a paddling trail. We are working regionally with Carrollton and Irving to go 22 miles of the Trinity River. And we're trying to get on there now, using to put in at Leela as one access point, and then all the way down in Irving for the takeout point. And as we get these other points in there, they'll just be additional points. But we're moving forward, trying to get that designation on the Texas Parks and Wildlife. We have 3 outfitters now working the river through the Louisville section.
Yeah, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of the rationale for making this a priority too was due to timing of other parts that are coming together too, like with Carrollton and so on, right?
That was
There was some timing.
That was
behind it,
correct,
so-
trying to work with that and get it on TPWD's website.
Yep.
Trying to help pull more of the tourism into town with the outfitters that are starting to paddle the trail. And a big part of it was safety, where they're doing it right now, out on Hebron Parkway. You drive down.
Oh, no.
And they hop the curb on the curve out there, so it's very dangerous. They slow down to hop the curb going down. And y'all driven Hebron Parkway out there, you know what the traffic's like. Well, it's even worse when they're coming back up, because they're coming up a hill where all they're seeing is clouds until they top the hill. And then they have to hop off the curb back into traffic almost on a blind curve. So it's a safety situation as well.
I will tell you that it is the best kayaking in the Metroplex, by far.
Definitely.
You feel like you are in a different, you're not in the city, you're out in the wilderness.
Trails Phase 1 was Park Board Priority 5. And they recommended some existing park development funds and using 4B cash when it became available over multiple years. It wasn't to come in and do them all at once. I will say, and we'll get into this more next week, with what we already have funded, through grants and what we have in place with DCTA and everything, it's pretty well taken care of phase one. Herring Rec Center renovation and improvements, that was their priority number 6, again, through cash. And we can get into more next week what those improvements are. It's minimal improvements. Big part of it is, staff work area, make it easier to manage the facility, give them workspace. And it expands some of the other areas, so we'll detail that more next week. We've already talked about senior activity center expansion and the reasoning behind that. Again, that's 4B funds, cash. And the park board also took a look as to when funds were gonna be available and the amount of the projects, and some of that played into the priority as well, so that they could balance the more expensive ones further out when there was more cash available. Edric House improvements was park board priority number 8, recommended park dedication funds. Now, we've been saying park dedication funds on several of these. This was some time ago. Some of these funds are no longer available because they've been used for other purposes. Some of them for some of these trail grants we've got. Here they had another priority, number 9, 4 more trails. This was to complete what they had as phase 1 and start phase 2. And again, this was unfunded at this point. But their recommendation at that time was consideration for a bond program.
And Bob, that kind of aligns to, we were to take this to the public a year from now, or at the end of the year, right? That this trails being important citywide may have a better opportunity to pass, right? And that's what some of the stuff we look at, okay, like a new rec center or trails, put that more into the bond program to help influence some of that, right?
Right, that was some of y'all's reasoning behind it.
Yep.
New recreation center, whether or not it included the aquatic component, there was discussion about that. There was discussion at any rate, if they were to move forward, they would want to take a look at a design that could later possibly add the aquatic portion to it. But that was priority number 10, and again, that was unfunded and recommended for a bond program. They felt like there was a need for it, but they felt like if the community recognized the need for it, they'd be happy to vote for it.
Question. Sometimes you speak in terms of aquatic, other times you speak of indoor water. Are those interchangeable or are they totally different?
I have used them interchangeably, but aquatic could be outdoor, just like the current aquatic centers that we have. But when I've talked about it associated with a rec center,
You're speaking of an indoor.
sanatorium, indoor water.
Or it could be a combination of both, similar to Flower Mound, that they had, right?
Could be.
Like water sites outside.
East Hill, open space, developed the park out there. Out there at East Hill, we've only developed a small 15-acre component for that neighborhood that's out there. We've got another 221 acres. Then he talked about a master plan that we originally had for that. It would have to be redone. We'd want to take a fresh look at it. But the park board felt like it needed to be developed. It can't just sit there. We've got the growth on the east side. We've also got the Corps of Engineers where we have the park lease from. We said we were gonna do all these wonderful things with it. and have yet to only develop 15 acres. So they had that as their priority 11. Again, it was unfunded and recommended for a bond program. At least some funding to get some development started out there. Maybe not full development, but at least get something started. And then their last priority was for a tennis center because there was some interest for that in the master plan and through the telephone survey. They recommended this for a bond program. It was unfunded. They recommended that because for the bond program specifically, because other than what was done on the master plan with the telephone survey and all, we did get some comments with Vision 2025, but we don't get a lot of comments, a lot of requests for a tennis center. What we have now are 4 tennis courts. Tennis is unique in some ways. Tennis players are gonna find a place to play. They won't necessarily complain about it, but they'll go find some place to play, a facility. It doesn't mean they don't want one in their community. If you build a tennis center, they will come. But how many residents actually want a tennis center? So that's why the park board recommended, instead of funding it, it'd be on a bond program and let the citizens decide. And that's what they took a look at in trying to make their recommendations. Again, trying to have a balanced approach all the way across. They looked at just trying to do it primarily with 4B cash funds as they became available, and then the last few were just unfunded and recommended for your consideration.
So what we wanted to do tonight was to give you a good historical basis before we start actually reviewing staff recommendations with you next week. We wanted you to see the master plans that have been developed and what we've actually already been able to achieve with those master plans, because we wouldn't have received the grants without those master plans in place. We wanted to revisit what the park board had worked on a couple of years ago. And you see that they've looked at some different needs, not just the big capital projects, but what's existing and what investments are necessary in those existing projects. The difficulty you have as a committee is that prioritization. There's so many needs in the park and recreation. Derek's right. The school system has been, or the school board's been very successful in being able to sell bonds to the public related to schools. I think you represent the residents of Louisville, and we're looking to you and your direction about what you think would be supportable in Louisville. I think there's several things you need to really think about. One is your surveys. Bob, this is a survey I mentioned earlier that was done with the 2025 that again shows trails as a priority. I will tell you from my own position, this is my personal opinion, is that a lot of times what's most sellable to the public are those things that private sector doesn't supply. What private sector is not going to go out and do is build trails. The other day I was watching TV and I saw on TV they had these privately operated rec centers, just like a rec center, that you could join for $9.99 a month. At one time, I think it was important that cities have pretty extensive rec centers. Theory being that most people couldn't afford to join gyms. I'm not for sure that's true anymore. So I think you have to step back and look at all of those issues in that picture about what is available to the public, be it either what your government supplies versus what private sector can supply. So next week, we will have the specific staff recommendations for you. And we'll have at least 2 more meetings that we can spend talking about parks. And then we're going to start turning our attention to facilities. Another issue that I want to deal with you, I want to deal with is in relation to the arts, and what you might want to consider in relation to arts funding. Denton was just very successful in their bonding program, including some arts funding that would go with their facilities. So that's another issue. So Jennifer, we have a schedule that shows tentatively what that would look like. Did we bring that, or did we just need to email that?
Yeah, that,
Jennifer,
that
that's
is
your-
super,
it's
yeah.
in the packet. It's in the packet. It's in the packet. So you guys have surprised me in the past. You did more quickly than I thought you might, and you may do that again. But it's just a tentative plan on what's left to be reviewed, and maybe when we get done.
Any comments, questions, or,
One thing, Bob.
yes?
I don't recall which meeting it was, but I made a request for an Excel, the actual soft copy of the Excel sheets. But I think it had to do with the streets.
You asked for one on stormwater.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Are we able to get that still?
Okay. Anyone else?
I'm sorry.
He asked for an Excel version of our stormwater funding screen.
Yes, we can get that covered.
Thank you.
Yeah, electronic rather than paper. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot which one. See, it was Drake.
Okay,
Well, I think I had a question about, the increases in the storm fee for the other cities.
Yeah, we're working on that survey right now.
Okay.
We've almost got that updated. We should have that at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
on, along those lines, it was very interesting, if you've seen or heard about the new 5-screen outdoor theaters coming in.
Excited.
They did ask for a variance so they could put in permeable parking rather than concrete or whatever, so it was, and the council approved it, so.
So tell me about this, I don't know this, what is this going to be?
There's going to be a 5-screen drive-in theater at the corner of
Midway.
This is 121 and Midway.
121 and yeah,
All right.
so, with a big,
We've
It's
been
the
to
same
the
one that
did it in
Fort Worth, and
14,
It's
or
a class
14,
It's not your mom and pop drive-in theater,
No, it's
it's
a-
pretty nice.
So same people as the Coyote?
yeah.
It is called the
Same.
Coyote.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're ice skating at the Coyote right now.
I was gonna say, oh, yeah, I saw that.
Okay,
Well, there's
Anyway.
one final item on your agenda, and they'll just need to table that. To the final item.
oh,
The next meeting, we listed it.
the staff prioritizations, or
Yes.
number 5. Okay, I guess I need a.
I put mine away.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Amanda moved to table
I'll
item 5.
second.
Okay, and Karen second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay,
Move to adjourn.
okay.
Are we ready for that?
Ready for that?
I'll second.
Second? Okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
All right, let's go to dinner.
Okay.
We're ready to go.
We're ready to go. What time is it? Oh, it's not even 8:30. My goodness.
It's my bedtime.
I mean, I didn't know how long this was gonna last, so I made sure to eat before I came.
Yeah, I stopped it. The puppies and I split dinner. My husband Thursday nights are his volunteer night. He's an ambassador at the airport.
Oh,
So he leaves work and comes to the airport. He's an ambassador for 4 hours every Thursday.